everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Greenbook podcast. I am happy to be hosting today. It's Karen Lynch. As you all have heard me before, I'm head of content at Greenbook, and I'm really excited to be chatting with Sarah Snudden, who I've known for a few years now. I've had the pleasure of, having dinner with her after an IIEX event and just kind of always having her in my orbit. Just excited to introduce all of you to her. She's the head of JDE Peet's U.S. Consumer Insights. And if you also have been listening for a long time, you know I'm a bit of a coffee fanatic. I would say I'm more than a fan. I'm more of a fanatic. So super excited to be talking to you, Sarah. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. We should probably introduce your beautiful dog, because if this is the first video version.
Right, the first video podcast, that's Maggie. Yeah. Maggie frequently makes appearances. So yes, I tilted to her. Thank you. She's a good girl.
She's wonderful.
She really is attached to my hip, especially after a week away at IIEX North America. When I'm away, she definitely has the kind of the secondary human in my husband, where it's like he'll do when I'm not home, but she then will be attached to my hip for the next several weeks.
I totally know the vibe. I have a small black poodle mix named Zuzu, who is also my primary workmate. I can hear her crunching in the other room on something, so she'll possibly make an appearance too. But I'm glad to be here. As you mentioned, my work right now is with the JDE US part of the organization. So I don't work with Peet's. They're a separate business unit out of the Bay Area. I'm in the Boston-based office. I do all things coffee and machines for a brand called L'OR, which I will say very badly because I have many strengths, and speaking French is absolutely not one of them. But it means the gold, and it is a wonderful brand that you will find in Europe, especially. And sometimes you bring those brands to the US, a little cross-pollination. We also have a system, a machine that works with it too. So the other brand we have that I should not shortchange is Tea Forté. Not to give it's a really beautiful brand.
Beautiful. Yes, I was going to say the kind of triangular
pyramids. Beautiful. Yes. Yeah. And so I work in the premium beverage space, I think is safe to say. I came before that from Keurig. So I've been in the coffee space for about 12 years. I've been in the world since 2012 of coffee. And I came up from cleaning toilets and fighting laundry stains at Clorox and at Seventh Generation. So I worked my way here. I didn't just get born into the world of premium beverage. I fought my way through Force Flex trash bags and Clorox toilet wands in the earlier part of my career. And I've been on the scene in insights more or less since about the year 2000. I got my start at Pillsbury back before they merged with General Mills in 1999. So that was my start. My first career break was I had my colorful 20s were more or less behind me. And I had figured out that I told I worked for a temporary agency because my colorful 20s were indeed colorful. It's a whole other podcast probably. But I told my temp agent at Kelly that I wanted to work in market research, and he should let me know. Dwayne Bootenshane, thank you. And they got me in at Pillsbury. And Steve Loring, who is a wonderful guy that I worked for, one day came up and said, "Snudden, you're not going to be a temporary admin your whole life, are you?" I said, "No, I want to grow up and be a big market researcher like you." And but I said, I don't want to. You guys are really snobby about the B school thing and going to business school and MBAs. And realistically, Steve, I'm pretty sure I can learn it on my own if I go agency side first. And he's like, "Snudden, you got it all wrong. You any good at standardized testing?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm kind of a nerd." He's like, "Study up for your B school entrance exams, hire on full time with us. We'll write you nice letters of recommendation. You go to business school for free." So I did the Madison program, and it was amazing. That was a really lucky break. And when I came out, I ended up at Clorox, which honestly, I liked a ton because I very quickly figured out that I worked well on the fuzzy front end, and Clorox had a lot of these really wonderfully type A plus linear analytical straight line kind of people, but the fuzzy front end really threw them off. And my colorful 20s worked in my favor in ways that I generally learned quickly not to say out loud in that piece, because I always have been super curious about why people do what they do. And from Clorox, I went to Seventh Generation, which got me to Vermont, where I'm currently sitting. And then that transitioned to the Keurig Green Mountain coffee world that got me into the coffee cup.
It's so funny because I remembered at a very young age, being a coffee fan, saying, I know I will have arrived, as I was a qualitative research consultant, right? So I knew, I was like, and I worked for a lot of big CPG companies, Kellogg and Nestle and Pepsi and Frito and, all of these, like I really learned my way around, people's kitchens. But I knew I wanted to land a coffee client at one point. So there was one day, I think it was 2017, and I had started working for a vendor, and, they nailed Starbucks as a client. And I was like, I have arrived. I have arrived.
Well, that's pretty amazing.
Doing the research I was born to do, So there's something wonderful about coffee, because it's just a great category, because it's both functional, pragmatic, and it's also very emotive and sensorially wonderful. So I imagine it's exciting to work on.
It's really funny. I went through at Keurig, really, it was 4 different versions of Keurig in the time I was there. And I inherited some qualitative ones when my manager abruptly quit. And it was a moderator I hadn't chosen, but the show was on. And so I stepped in and I gave her feedback on the guide, where I was like, hey, we're really not talking about the emotional benefits at all here. And she was like, emotional benefits? No, coffee is all about energy. And I was like, And I really thank Clorox for the training they gave me, because I was like, if there's emotions around disinfecting and cleaning your toilet and taking out your trash, I guarantee that there are emotions around your coffee. And she rolled her eyes and was not happy with me, but I prevailed, and the consumers went on to speak very emotionally about their coffee brand relationship.
Yes. Well, I'm sure Bridget, who's, behind the scenes producing right now, is smiling, because she knows how I feel about coffee. Anyway, I was disappointed this year. We just returned from IIEX. My disappointment was that you and I didn't even have a single meal together or 5 minutes to chat.
I literally saw you on the first day, and I could tell you were going so fast that I was like, you know what? I know one of the things I love about our industry is it is small, and you really get your connections going. And sometimes IIEX is frankly so overstimulating. And I enjoy that. I'm an extrovert who works alone, but it's a lot even for me sometimes. Yeah. And, because it's also a huge change of gears. I was psyched that I had a voice this year, because sometimes I don't get to talk that much in my day job. And there have been years where I just come back my talk was on day 2, so I had to be really careful to make sure I still had some wind left in my sails. Can I just say I'm an IIEX super fan. I did have to miss one during the pandemic, that one in-person session, but I've been thanks to Brent Snyder, who made me aware of it back in 2013 in Philly. That was my another career lucky break for me, because at that point I was about 13-ish years into my career and starting to see the cracks in the walls. And I had fought so hard to figure out what to do with myself as a grown-up. This adulting thing is hard sometimes.
It's really hard.
I really had soul searched. And when I discovered you could get paid a decent corporate salary to literally be why do the people do what they do, which was kind of a hobby of mine that I was not making much money at, I was psyched. I knew I'd found the relationship for the long haul. And there were those moments, though, when I was kind of more of an army of one at Seventh Generation, and you start to see the cracks in the wall, and some of the cracks that are coming through now in terms of how the sausage is made with respondents and surveys and all the things. And I have to say that when I got to IIEX the very first time in Philly, in the North American first time, I was so jazzed that for 6 months, it charged my batteries up in such a big way. I was like, other people see it too. Other people see it too. I'd found my people, the people who are solution oriented, the innovators, the people who are looking to take things to the next level and the next stage. And that made my heart so happy. Lenny has always been really good also about making sure that and Greg too, where on years where I didn't have much budget to work with, I could find a job. I was like, I'll wipe tables. I might sleep under the table. But I love that about our industry too, that we find ways to get the right people there and play the long game.
Yeah. Yeah. And we do, for people listening who are, like, gosh, I really need to get there next year. Cause granted we have other events throughout the year, but if that's your thing, like there are certain people that, just reach out to me. We can figure out, maybe you can share a track or, somehow or another be a part of the scene, even if times get tough. And, this is why we're doing a lot of work right now with Insights Career Network to offer them space too for people, because we know this industry, there's people that just come here and they stay here. I mean, I joined this industry in the 90s, for heaven's sakes. I've known no other industry really professionally other than this one. And I have seen for, 3 decades how people show up for each other. And those people that come and stay, they tend to be the people that will lift each other up, because we all work collectively, especially in the IIEX audience, to lift the industry up, right? That is a value that we all share. And so those people with that mindset that you just described, we all recognize that it's the combination of all of our brains together in that space that actually drive change. So
100%. And so that actually is a decent segue to how my talk came about, because one of the things that in my client side roles that I've had is always this focus on innovation in the product or brand experience, and also the brand strategy. In the client side world, Insights is very often, not always, rolled in with marketing. And so being the literal redheaded stepchild and also figurative in the marketing family, has been a good experience for me in terms of thinking about what's next. And IIEX really helps me think in my own field about how things innovate and how the strategies come about. So that's a good fit.
So we'll get into that. So let's kind of stay high level, because the talk itself was, AI imagining white space. So I'm very
imagining
white space. And you were with Dave Carruthers, who I did
very shy, also red hair.
Privilege of saying hello to. Why don't you just start with kind of where the talk, kind of the idea for it came from? Like, give us the genesis of it.
So very often on the client side, you've got a core portfolio of things that's like, what you do well and what you're selling and focused on. And then you've got these people who have to try to stretch beyond that. And it is really hard if you have a position where it's like keeping everything like humming through stores and through channels, and dealing with the real products in the real world. Something's almost always kind of on fire, or you're almost always reacting to something.
Yeah.
And then there's often, because of that, there's an innovation group that kind of pulls out a little bit differently, or is separate from the day-to-day wranglings of the business. I call it white space, because I think it's about, when you think about where the writing is on the page, the white space is the margins. The white space is the blank page. Old school paper reference, yes, but those of us who were around in the 1900s, we remember the paper. But the white space really gets us, into newer terrain. So I'm not the sportiest person, but if you think of core as like a base hit, you're updating. Maybe you're doing some marketing innovation. You're saying a new claim. You're redoing your bottle. You're coming out with maybe the next flavor of the thing. That's kind of the base hit space. And then you've got your doubles or your triple hits, where you get a couple bases out of the deal, or maybe more. That's more like the stretch area. You're still on the playing field, but you're hitting a little. You're getting a little more, but it's higher risk, high reward. And then if you think about like swinging for the fences, the home runs, the over the fence, that to me is the more provocative, really white space, because you're trying to take what you do and think about how to get more business synergy out of it, essentially.
So, I don't know if you remember, like if you're there the morning of day one, and I'm like, I'm such a baseball fan, so I'm so with you
Okay.
for this metaphor,
Well,
and
you
just
can
like
you can
want to
you
keep
can explain the
going.
rest to me, but I can get the basics. I had a nephew who
Oh
was
my
really
goodness,
big.
because when you're trying to go for those home runs, right? And get to that place, if you're a Mets fan, you want that great big apple to, rise up out of the machinery there, and smoke to come out and have the fireworks or whatever else happens. But often, to get that power, you often do swing and miss.
Yeah.
So to me, I think that's also a part of it, is you have to recognize that it is also high risk, right?
Yeah.
Huge reward, high risk.
Right.
So anyway, with you for
And
the metaphor. Thank you.
yeah, and so essentially in like, for those of us lucky enough or old enough who came through, our early years in corporate America and got these opportunities to do innovation, you used to get to go in this carved out time and really be away from your desk. You would watch the people do the thing. You would follow people who stretched your thinking about kitchen cleaning. I had one of my own adventures where I got to go to Chicago away from my office in Oakland and follow the food inspector around for the day because we were thinking about kitchen cleaning. I followed the guy who runs the huge hotel kitchen at the Sheraton and can have banquets that seat 3,500 people and runs an all-night kitchen and 2 other restaurants on site. All those people who kind of stretch your brain to really think bigger. And now, increasingly, in a world where you don't have the people power, you don't have the budget, you don't have the time, I'm afraid a lot of the trying to stretch for beyond the core ideas, it gets harder and harder because often you're trying to pull in people who have day jobs doing really core things. And, they're trying to make time to think like every idea is a good idea, except for we still have to then fit it back in our own bottle that we already have in the lines it's hard to do. And one of the things that this AI agency model that I talked about does really well is it's not as attached to the real world. So the other great thing about using AI in this way is I know my coffee space really well. And so when I was able to give this a try, those core things that it came back with, I was like, that's good. That's spot on. Let's really, it's going, the AI agents were going out to kind of scrape the internet and, find the bits and pull them all together to be the consumer basis. The face validity was really remarkable. And then when you get to the core area, AI is good at stretching and imagining things. And you get to the really more provocative ideas that are the hardest ones for humans to do. And it's actually really, that's easy for AI. And in the end, you're not using AI to validate or quantify or anything like that. You're using it to stretch your thinking. So this particular model and the way that One Strategy Studio has thought about the different jobs, the different agents that do the different pieces that come together to be the final result, it worked really well. And if your alternative is we could just try to recycle what we already have and have the workshop and get the Post-it notes and have an offsite, or to do something like this, it's so fast. And if you can make the resources happen to do like honestly less than a day of a focus groups and you get it right back. And if you don't like some of the ideas, you say, give me a little more of this, but a little less of that. And the iterations happen fast too.
It's like, so having facilitated more than one of those sessions,
I'm sure you have.
I'm
You
sitting
get a
here
great
thinking like,
graphic recorder,
it's like you're basically the facilitator, and the AI is an ideal group of participants because it answers, it does what the facilitator wants instead of getting attached to an idea. We used to say all the time, like, you can fall in love with an idea, but don't marry it because there's another good looking one right around the corner, and like AI.
Or it could be lonely for a while. There's that too.
Exactly. Let's take a step back with me, Sarah, and kind of explain then, how you and Dave happened upon this collaboration. Had you worked with him before? Did you kind of know what one strategy was doing? Like what brought you two together, or were you simply exploring tools and found them?
I mean, kind of both, because I'm kind of if I had a market research type in a typing tool that I kind of imagine, and to be fair, I've imagined this because I'm just like that. I'm kind of a scout. I like to be the bee that's out ahead of the hive, and I work really well if I can get paired with someone like Brenna Armstead at a Keurig who supports finding newer, better ways and would give me the runway to kind of, go out and do the pilots. And I found ways in worlds where I don't have always that exact kind of backup, like I did at Keurig, to kind of continue that. So part of how I do it is there's certain industry people that I follow that are maybe more like tastemakers, or I saw them have a really breakout kind of run in their first company. And Dave is like that. I keep an eye on him because he's just got that serial innovator thing. But in terms of like the more tastemaker, the champions of up and coming things, Christy Zulke is one that I really like. And that's how I heard about this one. And Susan Griffin is another one that I kind of like. Sometimes you cheat off someone else's homework. And I actually invest a lot of time keeping current and taking calls and meeting people who have new ideas. Having also someone who's got more focus in that area that I can kind of take a hot tip from works really well.
Yeah.
Obviously you guys at Greenbook would be another, not to bury the lead, but I think I got my initial hot tips from just being around the Greenbook Gen 2 world.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel like I've had this conversation before about, part of my role here at Greenbook is, speaker curation. Like I'm paying attention for a very different purpose right now. And when I talk to people like yourself, it's like, it's a lot of effort to stay fully versed. And I love when brands come to our event because they kind of fuel up. Right. But it's a whole nother type of moving through our industry. If you are staying current beyond just once a year, keeping those conversations up and talking to people, not just for what they could do for you right now, but who are they and what's their thinking that's going to move it all, move your work forward.
And I actually really love the cross-pollination, the matchmaking. Like if I have more spare time, I am always trying to think, who you should talk to, like that matchmaking, connecting the innovative new forces with the world of people who need innovation in their forces is exciting.
Yeah. I love that quality. It's a great quality. So you set out on this kind of adventure with Dave to kind of use AI in this way. You had a successful outcome, it seems. Pros and cons for doing it, but anything that you can kind of like call out specifically that, either an example from that work that just kind of highlight how it all turned out for you.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you don't get to give away the big surprises in the pipeline. But I will say, honestly, the ideas that came out, especially in the core space and how we've done multiple projects. One, I made the agents kind of take a twist and think about naming. And they really did a good job on the naming piece too. And that's a little easier to talk about because in the end, sometimes the naming decision gets made from a whole different direction. But when I think about how those names came back, I was like, oh, they have picked up on the logic that made certain competitive brands what they are. They have essentially named things that we've looked at that we know are off the table for whatever reason.
Right.
The agents that were coming back with the ideas, the face validity was really good for an application like this.
Yeah. I think that's interesting because the naming work that I've been involved with in the past is among the hardest in my experience, among the hardest in the kind of ideation space, because like people like lose steam, participants lose steam for it because you need like hundreds of names, so again, I think about that as a use case and I'm like, oh, that actually would be a great use case for AI because it won't have the fatigue that individuals get just continually trying to stretch and mix and match ideas. And again, all the tools that a facilitator can bring out cannot account for stamina.
Yeah, and think about this, it can even do it, in the language. So like there's a lot of espresso, Italian overlap, but we are a French brand. So I could say, all right, give me a little more Frenchiness. And the AI
and it knows what to do.
Could do that. I mean, way better than I could, as I acknowledge it. I I'm great with Spanish. I have Japanese, kind of like a colorful talking parrot. I can, but I don't have that, like it's hard to find respondents who'd just be like, oh yes, here's some ideas that are more Frenchy.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely a brain drain. So I love that. I love that use case. So I'm glad. So, so talk to me about kind of the journey that you were on then. Did you have concerns before you started? Was it, how did you say, you know what, we'll take this risk? Because you must have had something that was, kind of like the what ifs, the wonders, the house is all going to turn out.
Yeah. So technically the naming one was pretty perfect because we didn't have a lot of time. We had like some people, in one part of the organization that were on their path, but we're in the US and it was supposed to be, a really big, important launch for our market. And there's always the things when you've got different markets and different people speaking different languages that you have to kind of self-advocate so you don't end up with the Chevy Nova, the car that doesn't go. So we were kind of having that moment. And honestly, we had a little bit of money, but not a lot of money that we could spend. And I think one of the other things that is good to think about if you're trying to stretch into new space is sometimes really making your case for why you need a pilot with the money you have. Is sometimes vendors and people who are selling products and services can find a way to meet you where you are. And the naming case was one where we were able to do it for a little. I was an early user. That is one of the benefits of getting to be the scout sometimes is they're looking for people to
pilot the program,
pilot and kick the tires and take the ride with them and tell them what could be better. So in this case, the naming one was how we got in the door. And I was truly blown away, like I said, by how well it synthesized the space.
That's great. Yeah. That's great. So if you're thinking about the audience, people listening who are willing to say, you know what, maybe this is my turn to take this risk. Maybe I'm going to take a chance and I'm going to partner with a new supplier, or I'm going to check out a new, AI method that I've been curious about or whatever. What's the kind of stellar advice for somebody who's been there, done that, like taken that first step?
I think the biggest, hardest lessons for client side people, especially, but honestly, supplier side needs to know it too, is nobody cares about how. Nobody cares. Like I have an organization that is, they want it to be legal and viable and all the things that wouldn't get you in trouble. But beyond that, do not talk to them about how your engine works. What my organization wants and what a lot of organizations want, especially with those really, driven people at the top who are trying to make a lot of business action happen, is be brief, be bright, be gone. Like they want the implications. I've spent a lot of time really learning how to boil it down and having to let go of, I get really excited sometimes about what's in the insights engine. But that is not what my audience wants to hear. And in the spirit of really trying to be the gift of understanding, like the products we create are trying to do that. And my role in the organization is also to do that. So I think, it's more practically thinking about your organization's tolerance for risk. I wasn't putting any of our proprietary data out into an AI large language model that could be found by other models. This was a really nice use case to kind of get some experience because I got, frankly, all the benefits of AI without really a lot of risk.
Yeah. So that's really it, is start there. Start with something that doesn't feel like you'd, be jeopardizing company intel or secrets or,
Yeah. And that kind of transitions to, a surprise that I had at IIEX this year, because there have been times in our industry, and I'll take automation as another example, where, and last year's I felt was kind of closer to this, where it was like AI, like it was a lot of just like people saying like, AI, we got it, like you want it, we got it. Yeah. Automation was similar back in the day of like, none of us client side people are sitting around, looking out the window and thinking, yeah, I really wish I had more automation.
Yeah.
Or like, what I'm craving this afternoon? more AI. Like that
Yeah,
is not a job that we're trying to do. That is like an engine detail. And it's an important detail, but we are thinking about like, I need to get concept tests done faster. I need to be able to add test in a way where I'm not committing to get to do it one time
yeah,
because my product life cycle will give me 4 weeks, and I can choose if that's going to be at the beginning before we go into creative development, or the midpoint when I've got like a wire draw, like a sketch, or at
yep,
the end when I'm going to be mailing the ad and it's a disaster, like I'm sending it out into the world.
yeah.
So I think this year I was pleasantly surprised that it didn't seem, and maybe you were coaching people behind the scenes not to just be like AI, 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 AI. I thought it was going to be more of that, and
Yeah, move the conversation forward. Well, and so yes and no. Some of that was by design. We had
yeah,
a lot of calls for speakers that
mhm.
or call for speaker submissions for this event in particular that were what the conversations were last year, and I rejected those because I was like,
Okay,
we are
yeah,
so beyond talking about EI as an entity out there, and we're actually beyond listening to vendors, I think, who were saying, but we have an AI feature. It's like, we don't
neat,
care. Like that's great. We
yeah,
use mobile phones too.
yeah,
Similar
yeah,
sort of
yeah,
analogy. Like at one point, people were talking about mobile research and how important it was, and it's like, yeah, but at the end of the day, whether you're getting it, through some sort of mobile interaction, or whether you're, sitting people down in a focus group room, at the end of the day, it all comes down to the objectives you're meeting. So let's go back to that. And I think
yeah,
that most of the speakers that delivered, that had kind of winning call for speaker submissions, it was that they were like,
mhm.
we're back to research use cases. And yes, we happen to use AI to get there.
Yeah, yeah,
And that'll be where we are. I mean, we have an AI event coming up, which I'll probably call you about just to pick your brain to make sure that we elevate that conversation. But we'll be talking more about agents and the bigger conversations about, again, we're so beyond using it, whether to use AI and all that, but now we have to get very tangible.
One of the things, I mean, from last year and this year that I like, because for me it helps me also. I like to have really smart friends when it comes to the sample part. I used to
Yeah.
tell Lev at AYTM, like, I want someone else to think about the monsters under the bed in terms of how the respondents come through. But
Yeah.
one of the applications for AI that I also really think is important is in the qual space, and using that moment where you're able to get actual consumers that pick up their phone, or respondents that pick up their phone and tell you the story, or show you the brewer on their countertop, or show you where they keep their tea. I really like Conveo, and like what Bolt are doing. Get Why I don't think was there this year, but that notion of trying to quali quant in a way that's also really fast, and it gets me straight to the sizzle reel. So when I
Yeah.
think about like how to get that consumer voice really a seat at the decision making table on the client side, making decisions about how brands and products are going to evolve, I'm excited about those things in terms of getting the actual consumer voice literally kind of shortcutted all the way right into the CEO's ear. I
Yeah.
think that's a really exciting AI development too that has an important job to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Cool. Which is going to lead me into kind of this next question about any other trends you saw there, or kind of, emerging methods, or even just conversations that are pushing us further into the future. Anything else come to mind?
I would say that one of the big learnings I've had at IIEX over the years that I continue to kind of bank on is thinking about how, where there's emotion, you're so much more likely to get action.
Mm-hmm.
And so thinking about how that's played out across like not just our industry, but culture, I think, is interesting. I like what also thinking about mind states. That for me is one that honestly I continue to wrap my head around, because it's a new behavior to pause and think about how do you activate against a mind state. So I always love to see what Will Leach is up to. And he had a really great again, trained using AI to do particular jobs that help the human strategy go faster, go further. And I like what he's doing with Bevy, formerly known as Mindy. And that was one of my conference favorite talks.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I agree that, it seems like, back in the day when we were all getting our degrees,
in the year 2000. Sorry,
you're so much younger than me, which is making me feel like, oh God, I'm so old. Anyway, it's fine. Because I was doing it in the 90s.
I was just a late bloomer.
You were
just a colorful 20s, remember?
Your child in the 90s. Anyway, all good things. When you're studying consumer behavior, and it's like, that's basically what all of the kind of marketing programs and marketing research programs all talked about back then, was consumer behavior. And then we get into the marketplace, and we talk about consumer insights, and we talk about the voice of the customer, and we talk about shopper insights and shopper behavior. And then it's like, when people start to talk about like behavioral insights or behavioral economics, we're all like, oh, that's very important. And it's a whole different, like, our brains, we're like, we have to, engage our brains in these conversations. And on some level, it's what we've been talking about all the time. But I think the key difference is understanding the mindset, to your point, but also then how it's going to influence the future action, like what's about to happen because of where the consumer is. And it's that's the piece that is really hard for all of us to wrestle, right? The predictive angle.
I'm gonna differ with you on this one. I think I was really lucky to get amazing qualitative training early in my career. Lisa Fortini Campbell, who used to teach at Kellogg, and Gina Fong, who's continued and was professor of the year at Kellogg, and was in qualitative when everyone, right now, like in the business schools, a lot of the people are really into the big data sets and behavioral in that way that isn't the human way. And I think there's a really important job to be done of deeply understanding the people part. So when you were saying like, oh, there's the consumer and the shopper and whatever, I think I'm a little bit of an essentialist because I was lucky to have that training early on. And the fact that you're really getting at why do people do what they do. One fantastic thing about Clorox when I was there was they used to really make us go deep, and we would go out into homes, but we weren't allowed to come back and say what the findings were about laundry stains or trash bags unless we could also really say, okay, so there's like the behavior we're immediately interested, but then that takes place in the context of the kitchen or the laundry room. And that takes place in the context of the home, and the home takes place in the context of their broader life goals. And these are the processes that don't get the artisan, you don't get the time and space anymore. And I feel so lucky that I got that indoctrination of really making sure that if we came up with marketing piece, we had to think about how that worked all the way through. We had to thread it from the most basic product features all the way up. And of course, that stuff is still practiced. But when I think about like disinfecting, and you think about there's people who are proactive and reactive, and you start to see those patterns in a different way. There's people who I do it for me versus I do it for others. You see like the same behavior can be coming from a very different motivation. And all that to me is still so fascinating.
It's absolutely fascinating. Absolutely. I don't disagree. Were you involved? I don't know if you remember this. It was IIEX long time ago, pre-COVID, where Clorox shared the water project. Do you remember that one?
I do. And I left Clorox probably when the roots of that were still going. It's funny because one of the pieces, if you get to know these people more broadly, and this is, I'm proudly championing someone else's work on this one, but when you go out and do those interviews in home and you talk to people about water, one of the insights that was really wow for them was there are certain people who just remember with such fondness the experience of being a kid and drinking out of the hose, like the literal garden hose. And I'm actually one of those people. So I know it might sound weird in our filtered, more indoor world now, but that deep learning of really getting out there is what I wish we could all still do more of. And we need to still try to use the tools we have to get there. And
in home research, I did my fair share of ethnography too, and there's nothing quite like it. But what I loved about that one, and the reason why I bring it up, kind of connecting dots from what you just said, is they focused on water, period. Like they focused on water because it interacts with all of their products, right? There's a water component to it. And I thought that was very interesting to me, is not so much focusing on how they're cleaning, but just water in general as an everyday component and an everyday need. And of course it fed into some philanthropic work that they were doing. So it had this big, higher, lofty goal as well. But I think about that often when I'm involved in cleaning. I think about the water use as well as a piece of the puzzle, and had never really thought about that before. So it was one of those paradigm shifts for me, is thinking about how people use how people use and what their behavior is around water, which is like foundational thinking for how people then use the cleaning products on top of that. And I'm like, I love that foundational stuff. So
I mean, Clorox did some good work in that space. And one of my favorites, and it's short, is and this again, I'm championing someone else's work. In fact, it was Gina Fong and Pam Emmerich. They were out looking at the people who use Pine-Sol. And if you do the quantitative assessment of what do people want in a product, it's a light, fresh scent. But if you go out and really spend time with the heavy Pine-Sol users, those are people who that cleaning is a badge value. You've got people like out cleaning their steps with Pine-Sol because it says this person has their act together. Like they believe in getting your arm involved. These are not the cleaning wipe Swiffer people. And knowing those distinctions in a world where we're all trying to be more, readily available mentally in all the spaces, but there's that counterbalance of really know your heavy users that I feel like is still one of the creative tensions in insights and in marketing that I still keeps me coming back for more.
It's so interesting. This is, as predicted, Sarah. I was like, we usually record for about 40 minutes, and I'm like, but I when I enjoy a conversation, I tend to go over that, and I'm sitting here thinking, oh, here I am going over that. So let's kind of get towards a place where we're wrapping up, to respect our listeners' time. But first, kind of capturing was there anything else on your tick list about your talk or about IIEX that you're like, what, I really want to make sure we cover this before we get off?
We mentioned Dave Crothers, but Jonathan Williams is really the one strategy studio piece. We should probably give him a little shout out to. Charlotte White also did a great job on helping us keep the pieces flowing in the right direction. I think this year I'll continue to, I'm honestly still processing. It was only a few days ago, and I tend to take a lot of calls after the fact too, because sometimes you can do the demo right there on the floor, but to really like think or have a meaningful chat takes a little bit of follow-up. So I don't think I think I'm still processing. I maybe if it was Magic 8 Ball, I'd be like, reply hazy, try again later.
Oh, I think we have I gave it to my daughter. Somebody was handing out those 8 balls. I'm not going to remember who it was. It's over by the charging station. It's fine. It's fine. Anyway, so let's wrap with this question that I love to ask people. We're the future of insights. We say that at Greenbook all the time, and I love to kind of chuck that one out there. What do you think, Sarah? What do you think the future of insights is?
Oh gosh, I'll boil back to some key themes I've already mentioned. For me, it's always deeply about why do people do what they do, and often there's context and other pieces wrapped around it, but that's the fundamental question. And I think the balancing force on that is still the faster, cheaper, better. And I kind of think all things realistically have to be in play. I feel like the business landscape right now has gotten frankly a lot harder. And I think the eye on how organizations are trying to be efficient is happening in a really rapid way right now. If you look at sort of circling back to the our industry tries to take care of its own. I've got a lot of friends who have a lot of great experience that are looking for their next thing. And I'm hoping that as we continue to evolve and figure out the jobs to be done in the faster, cheaper, better world, we still get to keep answering that why do they do what they do part.
Yeah, that's so great. Thank you so much, Sarah. If anybody wants to reach out and find you, what's the best way for them? Oh my gosh, I have a cat appearance too.
Oh, that's nice. Who do we have here? The cat.
Finnegan. I have a Maggie and a Finnegan because
okay. And this
one's Finnegan.
All right, sure.
And then the golden retriever is Maggie because
I'm
married.
Sorry, I thought you were saying you had two cats. I was like, whoa.
No. I have a Maggie and I have a Finnegan because apparently, like, I married into this Irish name, and apparently, I'm gonna have a Liam the next pet or something.
Live it up. I like it.
Where can people find you?
LinkedIn. I'm actually quite attentive to LinkedIn, and that's the easiest way to find me.
Fantastic. Sarah, thank you so much. I knew I'd enjoy this conversation, and now I'm just going to pretend that it happened under the tent at lunch.
Yeah. Well, I'm off for the virtual tent, so
I love it. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And thank you to our editor, Big Bad Audio. Thank you for helping whatever you're going to do to help us with video too this time. So I appreciate that and all that you do. And of course, not just to Sarah, to Bridget, our producer, and to all of our listeners. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.